everyone. It is Saturday, December the 7th, 2019, 1:40 p.m. in the afternoon, and I am close to the summit of Balsam Beartown Mountain in the Allegheny Mountains of Jefferson National Forest, Virginia. This is one of the most remote, significant peaks in the southeast. It's the highest peak in the Allegheny Mountains of Virginia and is on a lot of lists on peakbagger.com, over 20, including some that are high priority for me, like the Southeast most prominent list and the Virginia 4,500 foot list. And I've been eyeing this peak for a couple years now, but it's in a very remote location of Southwest Virginia, about a 3-hour and 45-minute drive from Chapel Hill, and it is a pretty tough hike that involves a steep ascent on the Appalachian Trail, a steep bushwhacking descent, some forest roads, and a final difficult bushwhack to the summit of Balsam Beartown. Obviously, I've been hiking for a few hours now. I think we started around 10:30 a.m. So let me rewind and show you how I got here and what I've seen so far before I get to the summit. Approaching the Chestnut Ridge shelter on the Appalachian Trail in Jefferson National Forest, Virginia. This is a really interesting area. The rest of the forest on the hike up from Walker Gap was in sparse hardwood forest, but looks like this bald was cleared either for farming or in order to build the shelter many years ago. Let's go check it out. This peak is called Chestnut Ridge on Peakbagger, but apparently the shelter is called Chestnut Knob Shelter. 4,409 feet. One of the highest peaks in the Allegheny Mountains of Virginia. And it's a fully enclosed shelter. Interesting. I don't know if I've ever seen a fully enclosed Appalachian Trail shelter, especially in the south, but I guess with this exposure, it's for good weather protection. Pretty cool. A clearing on the rim of Chestnut Ridge, looking north and northeast into Burke's Garden, Virginia, also known as God's Thumbprint. Really great view from up here on a beautiful December weekend. Descending the north side of Chestnut Ridge through a couple inches of snow. Pretty steep and slippery going downhill to Henninger Gap. Burke's Garden, Virginia. We did a short bushwhack to the top of this peak, the unofficially named South Balsam Beartown Mountain. And north of that, we've come across this forest road again that follows these open meadows with spectacular views of Burke's Garden and our final destination of the day, Balsam Beartown Mountain, up ahead. We're hoping that this forest road curves to the left, dropping into this gap where we'll have to bushwhack up to the ridge line and bushwhack a few hundred more yards to the summit. Balsam Beartown Mountain is the high point of Garden Mountain, which is a subrange of the Allegheny Mountains in Virginia. Another prominent feature is Hutchinson Rock. This range almost completely encircles Burke's Garden, a very fertile, remote valley along the West Virginia border that is a Mennonite community. It's also nicknamed God's Thumbprint. I wish I did a little bit more research before I came out here. This was actually a spontaneous trip for the day. We had a different destination in mind, but I'm not sure how this was formed. It could be a volcanic crater, unlikely a meteorite, could just be a massive sinkhole. But you can see how flat it is, and then Garden Mountain completely surrounds this valley, and all of the water drains to the left heading northwest, and that is the road we took in to this beautiful valley. And the Appalachian Trail is off to my right and then follows the top of the eastern section of Garden Mountain for quite a few miles before it drops off, heading north towards Parisburg. So I have the National Geographic Blacksburg New River Valley map. This map is not going to provide great detail of the height, but it can show you the general area we're in. If you see this rim, this is Garden Mountain surrounding Burke's Garden, Virginia, and then the West Virginia borders right here. So we had to drive in on this really curvy road that dropped into the valley, and then we drove up to that parking symbol at Walker Gap and followed the orange Appalachian Trail, heading west in the south trail direction towards the Chestnut Knob shelter. And then from there, we did a bushwhack down the north side of Chestnut Knob or Ridge to Henninger Gap, picking up a forest road on the way down. And we followed the forest road. We're basically following the private property boundary and Jefferson National Forest Beartown Wilderness boundary, following some old forest roads. And Balsam Beartown Mountain is not even labeled on this map, but it's somewhere up here. And this giant meadow that I'm currently in is about here. So we're pretty close to the summit, but unfortunately it's not labeled. It was a pretty neat area. I've never driven through or hiked in this area before. Jonathan's up ahead. It's a difficult ascent, attaining the ridge line that leads to Balsam Beartown Mountain. It's pretty steep, and it's tougher with about 3 to 4 inches of icy snow remaining on the ground. But we're making good progress. That's where we came from, a few hundred feet down below, doing zigzags, coming up the hill so we don't make it too hard on ourselves. Standing on the highest ground of Balsam Beartown Mountain. Somewhere in this area, amongst the trees hidden under the snow, is the highest point of the mountain. Balsam Beartown is the highest peak of Garden Mountain and the highest peak of the Allegheny Mountains of Virginia. And I believe it's actually the second highest peak in the entire Allegheny Mountain range. I think only Spruce Knob of West Virginia is higher than this peak. The elevation is 4,710 feet with a prominence of 2,130 feet. It is the 6th highest peak in Virginia and the 3rd most prominent peak in Virginia. It's also the high point of the Beartown Wilderness of Jefferson National Forest, making it the 11th highest wilderness high point in the southeast. It is the high point of Tazewell County, Virginia, and is the 4th highest county high point in Virginia. And overall, it is the 20th most prominent peak in the southeast. So there's a lot of lists there that I just rattled off the top of my head, and there are many more. It is considered a range high point. There's multiple types of county high point lists it's a top 50 county high point in the east. It is a high point crossed by the Appalachian Trail, yada yada yada. You get the point. This is a very significant peak if you're a peak bagger, and we're both very glad that we finally got it. So it took us 3 hours and 15 minutes from Walker Gap, and I think that's approximately 4.2 miles one way. That included a 15-minute stop at the Chestnut Knob Shelter and about a 20-25 minute snack break at the Wide Open Meadow. So moving time is probably closer to 2.5 hours. And on the way down, we have to do a lot less climbing, so we're hoping to make it back to the car in about 2 hours. Easily the most difficult part of our hike, descending this ridge from Balsam Beartown in this icy snow. Very slippery. Back at this awesome viewpoint, successfully slid and hiked down Balsam Beartown, and we're going to head back to the car and take an alternate route that follows a forest road around Chestnut Ridge, which will eliminate a pretty steep climb. But it's a beautiful afternoon in Burke's Garden, Virginia. On our way back to the car, we passed through Henninger Gap, and instead of taking the forest road and a final bushwhack up to Chestnut Ridge, we are taking this forest road that bypasses most of Chestnut Ridge, most of the tough climbing, and as an added bonus, it is following the edge of all this pasture land in Burke's Garden. Unfortunately, since it's close to 4 o'clock, the sun is setting behind the ridge and it's not giving me the best light shading, but it's still a beautiful hike. It is 4:10 p.m. and we just finished the hike back at Walker Gap along the Appalachian Trail. In total, the hike took about 5.5 hours, and I tracked 9.2 miles, which is a little bit longer than some tracks I found online. It could have been just the bushwhacks that we decided to do instead of following other people's tracks. But overall, it didn't take too long. It wasn't too difficult. Overall, I think the toughest part really was coming down the ridge off of Balsam Beartown Mountain, because it was a pretty steep drop of about 300-400 feet with lots of snow, and it made everything pretty slippery and slow going. Otherwise, it was a great day of bushwhacking and peak bagging. Got a lot of stuff checked off. Always like that, to snag a peak that counts for a lot of things. And plus the views from that one spot that we stopped at twice for about 20 minutes of Burke's Garden were fantastic. And then the views on that forest road bypass that we took around Chestnut Ridge were also really good. but because of when we hit it in the day after 3:30, the sun was already behind the main ridge line. It would cause a huge shadow. It was just tough to take really good pictures or videos of that section. So if you do that earlier in the day, Burke's Garden would be lit up. It would look really great. Overall, I really enjoyed this area. Definitely want to come back and hike more of the Appalachian Trail going north over Garden Mountain. And hope you enjoyed it, and see you next time.